huge thank you to all of the speakers who are already on the screen joining for the Network One's Innovation in Pitching event. It's currently 1 p.m. London time, but we have members and friends of the Network One joining from all over the world, some as far as Australia and the Southern Hemisphere. So thank you so much for staying up so late in your day to join the call. A huge welcome from the Network One, the team here. Julian is currently in Istanbul at the Eco PR event, and our Alfie is in Slovenia for the Golden Drum Awards. So you are with me today, Helen Anderson, Managing Director of the Network One. Thank you so much for joining the call. I think this is going to be a really interesting discussion. I thank the speakers in advance for their participation. It's really important to note that this is the first in our kickoff series for our new special interest group focusing on new business. We do understand as independent agencies, it can be a lonely place when you're pitching and when you're looking at where the clients come from and qualifying leads. So we are using this as our kickoff for that particular program, and we will be sending invitations to everybody joining the call or watching the call on demand to invite you to the new group so that we meet more regularly to talk through these things and to share best practice in the group. Just in terms of an agenda today, in terms of timings, we'll do some quick rounds of introductions to the speakers who you see on your screen. And then we'll kick off with some main points for 5 or so minutes. And then we're actually going to go through a series of questions that we posed on the actual event invitation to cover off the main points that we think are relevant in this topic. And then there'll be about 15 minutes or so for questions at the end. So please, please, please start thinking about your questions through the session so that we've got some really relevant things that you might want to share or to ask the speakers on the call towards the end of the meeting. We are recording the call, so please, speakers, to remember that, and it will be available on demand. So and just to remember, we do have an international audience here today, so if there are any jargon terms, we'll try and explain those as we go. Two quick pieces of news from the Network One. The Indie Awards are open for entries. We have an incredible lineup of 28 categories that independent agencies can submit their work to. Everything from sector-led, so whether it be healthcare, financial services, B2B, through to regional agencies of the year. So if you fancy being Asia or America's Agency of the Year or European Agency of the Year, it's a great accolade to have. Or to nominate actually some of your rising stars, or you think somebody in the sector deserves the Indie Legend title for this year, then please do enter your categories. That closes on the 1st of November. So please, please, please have a look at that. indieawards.global is the website link for that. And we have another series of events, and we'll email everybody out in the network to update you on what's happening in our autumn and winter programme and quarter 4 for everybody else around the world. So I'll stop talking at that point. We'll introduce each of these lovely speakers on the call. Rather than me read off their biographies, I'm actually going to ask them to introduce themselves and tell you a little bit more about them so that the answers that they give today will be in context. And Ellie, we'll kick off with you, please.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. So I'm Ellie. I've been working in new business for the last 15 years. I started my career at independent media agency, the Seven Stars, and we were part of a global independent network called Local Planet. So we were the UK partner for them. So I spent 9 years there on the media side. And then 4.5 years ago, I joined BBH as new business director and partner. So I'm now creative agency side. So I've got a good experience both sides, and I've actually helped clients pitching as well. So I like to think I've got a good full circle view of pitching. And I also in the UK sit on the IPA New Business Steering Group. So we help shape the agenda for the industry.
Thank you so much, Ellie. Ollie.
Hi, everybody. So I'm Ollie Richards. I'm the CMO of the Beyond Collective, a London-based micro network of specialist agencies. Agencies you may have heard of, people like Above and Beyond, Yonder Media, Collective Studios, Frontier, and we cover, so we're full service, so it's creative media, strategy and production all in one place. So pitching wise, quite interesting because the way that clients interact and buy agencies is very different by discipline. So had good exposure to that. Prior to here, I spent quite a long time at Dentsu in the creative side of the business, initially at McGarry-Byrne, and then I ran new business in the UK for Dentsu Creative, which it's now known as. And then prior to that, I spent some time at Engine, which is a UK-based multiple services group.
Wonderful, Ollie. Thank you. Lovely Tom from Neverland.
Hi, I'm Tom from Neverland. So I'm the brand director of Neverland, which is a London-based brand strategy and creative agency. I started out my career in account management at Adam and Eve, so got lots of sort of hands-on pitching at Adam and Eve and Adam and Eve DDB. And then a few years ago moved sort of out of account management and client service into kind of a more formal new business, PR and awards role. So I kind of join all the dots here between bringing in new business and telling our agency story, kind of how they connect.
Thank you, Tom. And Jason will be a familiar face to many of you, having attended many of our indie summits over the years. Jason?
Hi guys, I'm Jason. I'm the founder and CEO of BBD Perfect Storm. We are a brand and cultural transformation company, proudly independent, and nearly 2/3 of our work is international or global in nature. So I've worked and collaborated with lots of Network One agency partners. Earlier in my career, I was a business development director, both for an independent and then within Publicis Group. So found pitching and business development and growth a key part of how my career has grown and developed.
Thank you so much to you all for those introductions. And just as a thank you to everybody joining the call, if you just want to write your name, your country and your agency in the chat and say hello to everybody so that people know you're on the call. I know the speakers would like to see who's out there and where you are. So I encourage you all just to drop that into the chat now and say, hi, I'm so-and-so and I'm from this agency in this country so that everybody can see. Thank you so much. And we will kick off. The event actually came from an article that you guys all contributed to in campaign. So I know you've got a couple of really key points that you want to get across initially, just to get the conversation moving. We titled the event Innovation in Pitching. Pitching is tough, and it's tough out there for indies at the moment. So if I may, if you've got a key point that you want to get across at the start of the call, Ellie, we'll kick off with you.
Yeah, the key thing I want to get across today is it's all about standing out from the sea of sameness. It's what we tell clients to do, and we're not always good at doing it ourselves. So it's how you make that impression and make yourself memorable.
Thank you, Ollie.
So I'm really passionate about how you create unfair advantage and during a pitch process. And I mean, it's a big term, right? But I think it's, where do you do that? Where is it right to be disruptive? And where is it maybe not appropriate to be disruptive? And then how do you use that I mean, we're all independent agencies, right? So how do you use that independent spirit throughout in order to differentiate compared to other agencies that maybe wear bigger capabilities, whatever it might be?
Lovely. Thank you. Tom?
Yeah, I mean, I think the main thing that I want to get across is kind of the role of new business and winning and pitching for agency stories, and kind of telling your story and building your story, and showing the network that you work in and the industry you work in, kind of your momentum and growth. So yeah, I think that, and then other bits and pieces about kind of the process, how the others have said.
Thank you, Jason.
Great, and ironically, given that this is about pitching, I think the key point I'd like to make is how you possibly avoid pitching, and the different ways that you can potentially do that, and if you do have to pitch, how you possibly change or bend the rules.
How you bend the rules. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on bending the rules? What do you mean by bending the rules, Jason?
And I'm realizing this is being recorded. Am I going to say things that I may later regret if they're repeated? Well, I think that most pitches, there's often a clear set of rules that are laid down. And when those rules are laid down, there can be this thought that you have to follow them. And actually, in my far too long experience of working in agencies and working on pitches, those rules can often be rewritten, and at the very least, they can often be bent to your advantage. To give you an example, we are in an active dialogue with an intermediary about a pitch that's coming up. And there's a discussion as to how long we should have, exactly what the requirements of that pitch should be. And I think it's in all of our interests to try and minimize the amount of time and minimize the amount of costs that we have to put and invest into that. And most reasonable intermediaries, they need to run a process, but I think they want to run a fair and efficient process. And so if you can demonstrate to them in an active dialogue why it's in everyone's interest that creative work might not be necessary, And if everyone can agree that is a fair playing field, and if you can agree a shorter timescale, then actually I think you're doing all of the parties a service there in terms of, as I say, changing those rules. Bending the rules, I must admit, one of the things that frustrates me is this idea and notion that when you're on a pitch, everything has to be fair. And often you'll see procurement, for example, if you submit questions, or if you ask for, say, a tissue meeting, they say, well, we have to then share the answers with those questions to everyone. And then we have to share, if you're going to have a tissue meeting, well, everyone else needs to have one too. I'm not personally clear or sure why that should be the case, given that if you're asking a really smart question, surely you should be the only one that gets to hear the smart answer. So sometimes there is ways to circumvent that, and I think as long as you do that with diplomacy intact, we've never been disqualified from a process. So sometimes they say never contact the clients directly. If you do and the clients are happy to respond, then I think that's sort of fair play. Obviously, if you get your hand slapped and told not to, then you don't want to be disqualified from the process. But yeah, I would say bending the rules is fair game.
Thank you for that. And we just had a question in to say the chat is disabled. I think I've now activated that. Please forgive me if my tech skills are not as good as Alfie's, and that's not happening. But we do have the Q&A function, so you can enter some bits in there. Oh, there are some people putting some things in the chat. Hi, Henry. Okay, I'm just going to run through. I mean, the current pitching climate is hard at the moment. That's what we're hearing. We're hearing that tenders are taking longer and longer, clients, brands taking longer and longer to make a decision. They're adding rounds in. It's sometimes maybe not a fair process. That's certainly what we're hearing from agencies. What's your current, experience of handling pitches? I mean, Tom, you have a very clear kind of strategy on what you choose to pitch for and what you don't you?
Yeah. So, I think every agency sort of ends up developing their own version of it, but ours is you have to pick 3 out of 4 categories, which are money, fame, people, and work. So is the money right? If it's £10,000, it's not going to be worth it. We'll spend more on the pitch. If it's $1 million, great, go ahead. But then also, what does it tell for our story? The fame element is, are we going to make work that will shift our business forward or help us show another element of our prowess? Do we like the people? That's like really, really, really important for us. Are we going to love working with them, or are we going to regret having to have a weekly status call with them? And then also the work, do they want the shape of work that we like making and we want to be making and we think needs to be made? If they want lots and lots and lots of DR banners, that's kind of not our skill set and not our passion. So we have to hit ideally all 4, but kind of our minimum to go into a pitch is 3. Sometimes we won't know the people from the beginning, so we'll say we've definitely got 2 out of 4. The chemistry session is going to be all about finding out about the people, and that's how we kind of approach that part of the process. I think what's important for us is kind of no matter the climate, we always stick to that. So the beginning of this year was really quiet for us, and I think it was kind of in the UK as a whole. But we held that level, because the worst thing you do is bring in something that doesn't fit the rest of the agency, and it just disrupts all of our other work.
Thank you. I mean, Ollie, you certainly said it's picked up. It was quiet, and now it's picked up for you. And you're qualifying those leads when they come in, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, I have a bit of a unique view on it because we are multiple discipline. I think media's been very steady this year. Creative for the first half of the year was really hard, right? And I know in Europe and in APAC, that's definitely been the same for all of us. I think the US has been slightly different. But as creatives picked up, I know I can totally mirror what Tom was saying, right? If you don't have these conversations about what you're right and what you're not right for up front, in the heat of a pitch, you will probably just say yes, right? That just always happens, right? And I think agencies default to yes normally when stuff comes through the door. So my phrase that I band around, and my lot are so sick of me saying it, is, what is our right to win? And if you understand what your right to win is, and that is, have we got category experience? Do we know the clients? Do they know us? there's a bunch of questions that we'll ask ourselves that will just establish whether we have that right or not. And then we make a decision based on that. And I'll put a percentage chance of us winning it based on that. And if it's not above 30%, then frankly, it's probably not worth doing. And so what's been nice about creative at the moment is that for most of this year, we've just been chasing stuff and desperately trying to push anything we can in. And I think now we're getting inbound opportunities. We're getting much more forensic again about, what we will and won't do, and just, having those conversations again, which is just nice, right? Because that's what we're all here for.
It is. It certainly is. Ellie, you also have a framework that you qualify things against, don't you?
Yeah, so similar to Tom, for ours, we like the 3 Fs here. So it's fun, fame, and fortune. So similar is it that are we going to make the work that we want to make, and is it going to make us famous? Is everyone going to enjoy working on it? Because there's nothing worse than bringing a piece of business that people aren't excited about and no one wants to work on. It's not worth pitching for it. And again, obviously money matters. Q4 is hard for us. We've got big retail clients, so it is so busy with current clients, and that's always a balance. Obviously we need the resource for big Christmas ads that we're making at the moment. And I always think a good Q1 sets you up for the year. So for us now, it's about looking, if pitches are coming in, are they going to be done before Christmas, or we're really strict about closing over Christmas? So is it going to be chemistry before Christmas? That's what we had last year, which was great. Actually, we had a chemistry, we knew we were through, we knew the short list of agencies, and then they didn't brief until January. And that's what we're seeing. A lot more intermediaries are getting strict about, which is really good. So for us, it's being really strict about our qualification criteria this side of the year, and trying to set ourselves up for a good January, because then the revenue is actually recognised in that year, isn't it? So you need to have a good Q1. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly the nature of pitching is changing. The days where we were all in the office and physically in the office, God forbid, all the time, and you were working on pitches at midnight. I mean, has that changed? Has that shifted? Is that still happening? Are independent agencies actually seeking for that not to be the case anymore? Is that culture changing?
I think we're probably a bit of an outlier in London. I don't know, from chatting to Ellie and Ollie about this. Like, we're quite an office-based agency, so we, when remote, but we're a team of 60 or 70 odd people, and I think on live client projects is a bit more sort of spread out. But when it comes to pitching, we try and get people in, not necessarily like every single day, but around the key meetings. It's much easier to just be stood in a room pointing at things on a wall and printing things out and kind of jotting things down than doing it remotely. So yeah, I think our pitching is kind of how it was before. So very sort of office based and kind of stuff up in a wall and kind of lots of face-to-face conversations.
Yeah, ours is the same. Pitch war room is our key. For any successful pitch, we have to have a dedicated room that people live in, and it's covered in walls, and you've got the product in there, and everyone's living and breathing, because that's how you get to the best. We're predominantly office based too, and that's how we found we get to the best work, to be honest. I would say though, pitching we're a lot stricter with timings. We don't want people working into the evening. Absolutely no weekend work, and if you can avoid it at all costs, unless it's a Monday pitch, which sometimes it's hard. But yeah, we're really strict with evening working and weekend working, which I think is very different to the beginning of my career, where I was definitely mounting boards till 3 a.m. the next pitch, which doesn't happen anymore, I'm glad to say.
Ollie, you talked about that bleed into your personal life. I mean, the nature of work has changed in that is a blurred line more now than ever before. But yet, maybe we're in a shift change in terms of, what we expect from our teams.
I think so. I think also our teams have much bigger expectations of us than maybe we had when we were starting. And so I just think they won't tolerate it like we did, and that's probably good. I also think the technology we now use means that you don't have to have, and everyone here would have experienced this, right? That awkward, everyone sat around till 3 a.m. waiting for the ECD to put a signature on a piece of paper on a wall, right? And I've got some fond memories of that, but also that was crazy, right? So now you can send some people home at a more reasonable time, and they can be logged in remotely doing whatever they need to do. I think also if I really reflect back on those days, and I mean we had some horrendous ones where we were doing really, really long hours till very late, and then coming in 4 hours later to do the pitch. how was that even remotely good? Do you know what I mean? Like the team in the room were knackered because they'd been up so late the night before. So I think to your point, Ellie, having a really strict timing plan now, knowing that the people that in the room aren't going to want to stay really late, but also that it's in your best interest to do it, it's more important than ever to have that.
Yeah, I think just to build on that, certainly it's our experience and my experience that the overall climate has improved. And in the UK, there's something called the Pitch Positive Pledge, which most of the kind of major intermediaries and a lot of big client pitches have signed up to, which is a pledge that there's only going to be pitches for very sound reasons. And when there is a pitch, it's then run under much more reasonable parameters than the kind of days of old, where there's proper consideration given to public holidays, to reasonable timelines, the demands of the pitch, etc. And that does seem to have, generally in our experience, improved the requests and the demands of clients and intermediaries. Do you guys find that as well?
Definitely. I mean, actually, the pitch positive pledge has been a really good way of framing a reasonable conversation up front about a process for me. And because I'd encourage anybody, even if you're not in the UK, to look it up, because you can just frame stuff. You can just go, is the ask commensurate with the prize at the end? Great question, right? Do you have a budget signed off? These are all just reasonable things to ask. And it means that you are just then qualifying it up front, and then you know what you're in for. And it just means that everyone behaves a bit better. So yeah, totally agree, Jason. I think it's a really good point.
And it gives you the framework to talk to clients. So we send it out when we first get approaches by clients. We will send it to them and say, we're signed up to the Pitch Positive Pledge. Have a read. We'd love you to sign up. And it gives you more weight to push back to clients and to intermediaries as well who've signed up. We've often pushed back and said, well, you've signed up to the pledge. This is not adhering to the principles. But back to my point about Christmas, I feel like a lot of intermediaries are really proud to say, oh, we won't be doing it over the summer because we want people to have time with their kids, or we won't be doing it over Christmas. So I think they're all fighting against each other to be seen to be against the pledge, which is great.
It's really interesting as we start to see Gen Z and Gen Alpha coming through, right? They're not that far behind. Actually, things out of hours to them is still work time. I mean, we see in agencies, you know, we used to have like Friday drinks or Thursday drinks or whatever. They now see that as, is that work? Or is that, you know, am I socializing in my time? And, you know, there's a real shift in terms of their expectations of the leaders in the agencies and what they're willing to put forward. There can be a bit of a dichotomy there between agency leaders and what we had to do and the experience we had coming through the sector and pitching in that environment, and what the new generation are like, oh, well, I need to stay to do that. I mean, you know, whether it even be a social event, there's definitely a shift for that. And they're seeing that as a cost on their personal time. And, you know, it's a really different environment to work in that we're all navigating, actually. And I don't think anyone's got the real answers to that at the moment. But when we talk about real costs, I mean, as leaders, we've got to consider all of those factors, right? And, you know, people are specialists in their area. And if they're suddenly not around and that's crucial to the bit that you're developing for the pitch, you know, that can be quite detrimental to the end result, I think. So how can agencies innovate their pitching processes? So, and, you know, AI is going to be a term that comes up. We've had a question come in from Mark Gomp as well around, you know, how each of your agencies might be using AI to make the pitch process more efficient, not just the implementation, the activation, but the actual pitch process as well. So if you can cover that in your answers. But, you know, what kind of things have your agencies done to innovate your pitching process, whether it be tech or not tech, you know, even if it's just a people element? And Tom, we'll come to you first, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think our pitch on our approach to sort of every single pitch is it comes from one of our founders and drives me slightly mad when I'm asked it, is how do we win the pitch before the pitch, which is great and I love, but then when it's on me to think of how we do that, so it's like, you know, every pitch is different and every process is different, and kind of, you know, the people involved are different and the stakeholders. So you know, for us, you know, we have like a base level of approach that we'll always take to a pitch, but we're always looking at every single stage from the very beginning. What can we do to be, you know, to win it? So the first document they see, we need to be the top of mind. So yeah, kind of we innovate in little ways and kind of learn from every pitch. I think in terms of AI, I kind of haven't brought it sort of formally into any of our processes, but I know that lots of our teams are using it to kind of kickstart research and kind of just get a jump ahead on competitor research, market research, trends, consumer insights. Not as type it into ChatGPT and get all the answers, but as kind of thought provocation of areas to then go and do more formal research into. And I think at the other end of the pitch, it's really helpful with quick visualizations of things. I think I remember many pictures where you're sat trying to superimpose a 70-foot boot on the Buckingham Palace or something completely ridiculous, and you're there till 4 a.m. trying to retouch something. And it just speeds up kind of, those things that you flash up that would have taken hours in the past. It sounds small, but it means our design team can look at other things and kind of be focused on bigger questions than mocking up little visuals. So yeah, that it's kind of limited AI at the moment, but excited to hear what the rest of you are saying.
Jason, we've talked before about getting under the skin of why they're pitching, right? Talk to me about what BBD Perfect Storm do there.
Yeah, and I think first of all, I should say that. Well, I'll go on to talk about why I think you should try to avoid pitching. But when you are pitching, I think it is certainly for our agency and for me some of the most exciting, exhilarating moments of my career have come from that. And yeah, I think it is where we often produce some of our best work. You're at your most innovative when you're operating under those constraints, and often where we've created our own IP. So I do love pitching, despite the fact I'm going to talk about why I think you shouldn't wherever possible. But how do you innovate? Well, I think first of all, as Ollie said, you've got to be clear what it is that you need to do to win. And there's often the saying, you win on inspiration, you lose on administration. Often, you win through your ideas and then you lose through your ability to manage the client properly. But knowing what it is the client needs and wants and why they've called the pitch and what it is that you'll need to do to win, I think is fundamental. There's also this notion of how you innovate in process versus how you disrupt in process. And sometimes it's even simple things like just being willing to stand out and do things a little bit differently. I mean, we recently pitched for a client, and we had a 90-minute pitch and we pitched in 25 minutes. And the presentation was super short. I think we showed 4 pieces of creative work, and it was very clear what the strategy is. And we won that piece of business. And the client said, you were by far the most confident, clear, and just kind of, it just breathed a sense of belief and confidence in exactly what you were saying and doing. And it was for an international client, and they said they're being bombarded with super thick decks. And they said, you guys were just very confident and clear in what you were saying. And you could argue that that's being quite innovative and disruptive and just taking a third of the time, but actually really being succinct and clear about what you're trying to say. I think it was Coco Chanel that said, whenever you look in the mirror before you go out the door, take something off. Don't be afraid to cut it back and pare it back and take something off.
Yeah, I think the Churchill quote is, if I'd have had longer, it would have been shorter, or whatever. It's the same principle, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that. Ellie, you talked to me about being collaborative, partnering with the right people, innovating through the way that you pitch.
Yeah, so this was back to my 7 Stars days, and it's actually how I know Tom. So Adam and Eve, before they were Adam and Eve DDB, and the 7 Stars had a joint venture called Eden, and Tom and I actually did a job share, and we shadowed each other's jobs to learn about the other side. So we came together and we would pitch together, and we won a client in the telecoms sector. So again, that was a way of innovating and pitching together and shared learnings, and I got to meet Tom through it, so that was a great experience. But for me, innovating in pitching is, as Tom said, being a meeting ahead, knowing what will win it, but thinking about what's that elevator pitch. So Jason, I think that's such a great example. No client ever said there weren't enough slides in a pitch, and that you would give them a really clear elevator pitch. So when they at the end of the day, when they're looking at all of the different agencies, they sort of, what's that one thing they're going to remember, because they don't remember every slide. A lot of our slides are similar. And you would have given them that really clear red thread and elevator pitch of the reason they won is X, rather than you've shown them 150 slides and not made it clear what you're telling them. So yeah, it's all about standing out from the sea of sameness. We've used AI to develop a thing called the Zig Index. So it's how we start all of our pitches to try and be memorable. And this AI tool looks at the whole category that they're in, and it will generate an ad. It will generate all the stories the ad tells. It will tell you the colors everyone uses, and it's such a visual, amazing way to show a client this is the enemy. We do not want to be in a sea of sameness, and it's really visual. So we try to get away from screen as much as possible. We try to be interactive. Like, no one wants to sit and look at PowerPoint, so we try and get clients up and look at this wall and say, this is collectively what we're fighting against. And then you've got a really good way to frame the conversation, and you've got a really clear way to zag and stand out.
So the days where you go in and pitch and say, this is our team and this is who our current client base are and this is who we've done stuff for before and this is what, you know, are those days gone? I mean, are clients expecting more from agencies? Ellie?
Yeah, definitely. There should be a reason why you're on the pitch list, and the early stages, the RFIs and things are for all of that housekeeping. And by the time you're actually meeting the client, there's a reason you're on the list. They don't want you regurgitating your creds to them. Only talk about other work if it's really specific to them and why it's relevant to them. I think we try and talk about ourselves in a few slides and as short as possible. You can send them pre-reads, you can send them things ahead, or you can follow up. But a good meeting is not talking about yourself, it's talking about them and their challenges. So we will always try and get into the client, and you have license to get it wrong in the early stages, don't you? Especially in chemistry stages. So again, when I talk about trying to be a meeting ahead, clients love it if you've started to think about them. Don't ever try to give them the answer in those early stages, because you don't know enough and they know more about their category and it can come across as arrogant. But show them that you're excited and you've started thinking about it, and get into conversation and have it as a two-way dialogue. Of course, they want to know the team, and when it's an international remit, it's very important. You can have people on screen or people from other markets, but you can send a lot in a pre-read, or we do things like microsites, or we'll set up an Instagram page or something. Again, it's creating that unfair advantage that Ollie was talking about, and show at different touch points that you can talk to them, so that when you're in the room with them, it's really interactive and it's all about them, and give them a feel for what it would be like working with you, because they buy people at the end of the day and they post-rationalize. So yes, they've got a scorecard and you do need to make sure you're checking off all the different things, but it's about people and if they want to work with you and how you make them feel rather than what you tell them.
And Ollie, you talk about, you know, the customer journey, which, you know, most of us are kind of so focused on winning the pitch, you forget about the relationship element. Talk to me about what you do for that.
So I always talk to my lot about like the work and the presentations and the formal stuff in the brief is the 90%, right? And if you're not parity with everybody else or better than everybody else at 90%, frankly, you probably shouldn't have even said yes to it. You didn't have a right to win, right? So assuming that stuff is in hand, you're then playing in the 10%. And the 10% for me is normally the difference between winning and losing it. The secret for me is really, really understand what the pitch trigger is at the beginning. I think Jason was talking about this. Clients tend to pitch. There's not many reasons they tend to pitch. It's either we've grown out of our agency, they've pissed us off, or, you know, maybe we're looking for something a little bit different. Maybe we're looking for a different caliber of work, whatever it might be, right? So once you know and really dig on this, dig until you know the pitch trigger. Don't take the first answer, ask around, get a point of view on it. Then you can start articulating what your unfair advantage is. How are you uniquely positioned to answer that challenge, right? And then you can start going, well, okay, how are we going to show up throughout the process, articulating how we're going to do that? So it might be that they're looking for a different shaped agency with extra capabilities. That's a great moment for me to go, okay, well, I've got different people in different disciplines here, or I've got different people in different disciplines around the world in the network. How am I going to bring them in? Always fly them in, to be honest. That's always been my learning with it. If they're in the room, you're always onto a winner, right? If it's about collaborating, how am I creating moments in the process where it's not me talking, where I'm actually collaborating, where they feel like they're in the kitchen with us? So that might change the style that we're presenting in, right? Because they're not getting the collaboration they want at the moment. The other one that has worked really well for us is about showing understanding of the category. So if they've worked with somebody for a very, very long time and they've got a little bit dusty and a little bit, you know, samey in terms of the stuff that they're trotting out, think about throughout the process, what's the thought leadership? What are the point of view on their category that you can get out there? We've even done targeted LinkedIn ads to the people that are in the room with very, very focused thought leadership, so that they're reading what we're thinking throughout the process. So they come in the room, they're like, hey, I love what you guys were saying the other day. And you're like, cool, it was only targeted at 6 of you, so it's fine. But it's that but there's all these things that you can do, and they just because you know the trigger and you've worked out how you can articulate an unfair advantage, you're then just pushing throughout. And that's, I mean, you generally know if you've won a pitch, because they'll come in the room and they'll have seen something or they've responded to something like that. And yeah, that's normally a really good buying signal.
There's some really good tips there. Thank you so much for sharing that. In terms of internationally, because Ellie, you picked up on the international there, we do have a quick question. What was the competitive platform you mentioned? That's coming from Kevin, David.
So that was a tool that we've developed as BBA.
Internally, there you go. Okay, all right. So we here at the Network One, we've listened to that. Other people are interested in those tools, and I know we've got a few people on the call that are developing those in-house in agencies as well. So we'll perhaps do another session on what tools people are using and how they're effective in future events for the special interest groups. So we'll pick up on that. And Ellie, you'll have to let us know how your tool's doing. Talking about international, I know a lot of BBD Perfect Storm's work is international, isn't it, Jason? Talk to me about how you tap into those international opportunities and outside the domestic.
Sure, and it's not necessarily the sort of natural, instinctive thing you would think for, a mid-sized independent agency based in London, that the majority of our work is actually international or global. I think the Network One has been an amazing enabler of that, and we tend to distinguish between what we would call global work, i.e. work you're producing that runs all across different markets, and then international work, which is, okay, we're doing work in the Middle East for Dubai or Australia or something like that. In terms of both of those, often what we'll do, for example, at chemistry meeting, is get all of the local indies to record little clips that introduce themselves, and actually also sort of little local market insights if it's related to the question. Just a great way to bring them into the room that is super low cost, but actually kind of brings a credibility and authenticity to it. If you're in the UK, I have to say the UK Advertising Export Group can be a very useful way to leverage and enable you to travel abroad. They're particularly good in markets like the US and the Middle East. And I know they also do trade missions to China. More broadly, and dare I say, it's not the most sustainable response, but I'm always surprised by people's unwillingness to get on planes and how important it is to actually being able to go and build international markets. Yes, through COVID, our business really grew internationally, but the way it's expanding, the way it goes now, is because we have people that are willing to go and meet people in market, and ultimately we're a relationship business, and relationships are built in real life. That's where you find connection and ultimately progress in terms of decisions and clients. So it's so important to be willing to spend time in market, and if you are, I think you might be surprised by how often clients are willing and embrace a perspective from a market outside of their own.
Similarly, however, if you want to boost your ESG credentials, and for all the big corporations that might be on the call, and those that are committed to kind of ESG principles and reducing carbon footprint, the Network One is here to help support you internationally. So the beauty of the Network One, I'm going into full sales mode here myself, is that we can connect you with local, very, very senior owner founders of agencies anywhere in the world. So that's the beauty of the Network One. I'll get that pitch in now, otherwise Julian will never forgive me. When you are, international partners are a key part of some people's growth strategy. So Ollie, you picked up on, especially in the media space for you, more often than not, it's going to be part of your offer, isn't it?
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with what Jason's saying, right? If you are in a room with someone talking to them, you are going to get a far better idea of what it is they need, whether that's a client or an agency partner on the ground, right? And I think my big learning from this was not everything you do is going to export well. It's just like, and so the more granular you can get and the more you test it, the more successful you'll be with partners. So like, I can talk from our perspective, right? Media buying is just a service that exports really well. Like, we can buy traditional media in the UK and Ireland. It's a key market for lots of people. A lot of people will do the planning themselves and they'll come to us to buy. We've got buying power, right? So it's a very rational purchase. Production's sort of the same, right? So if you need lots of assets produced, we can probably do it at a reasonable cost. It's quite a rational purchase. So what I'll tend to do is I'll go to the partners in market and go, these are generally the services, and they tend to be a first conversation way in, and then who knows where it's going to go, right? But the only reason that I even got down to that to start with was just because we spend a lot of time meeting people and understanding sort of what the challenges they're facing are, and so that would be my starting point for anybody who's looking to do more of this stuff.
And any strengths and weaknesses, and understanding what your strengths and weaknesses are was one of your key points, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And making those relationships ahead of a pitch coming. So knowing what your international capabilities are, being honest with them, and not going for, I've definitely had experience of going for opportunities thinking, oh, we can wing it and then we'll work it out if we win the business. And it does not work. I can tell you that. But it's buddying up with other agencies, going and meeting them. A client can spot a mile off if you've just put a team together for the pitch and they've met each other in the pitch room, especially if there's a suitcase or something. But it's making those relationships and actually testing it and working together so that when you do come together, it's more authentic and the client can see that you're actually used to working together. So do that ahead. If you want to go for international opportunities, look at what you think they are coming down, look at where you don't have skills and capabilities. So when we work on international clients, we work as the UK hub, and then work with different partners, whether we have those within BBH or whether we need to reach out and find those in different markets. But we find that being kind of the lead interagency alliance helps. Then we gain control and we can know where we need to upskill and where we need to partner with other agencies, but definitely do it ahead of the pitch. The pitch is stressful enough without having to then make new connections and meet new agencies.
Yeah, Tom, you talked about that. You don't necessarily have a pitch team ready to go, do you? You don't have something, or you're actually building teams based on the spec.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of our, I'd love to have a sort of a big pitch team just kind of like on the bench ready to go. But, you know, we're a small to medium-sized agency, so everyone is busy on client work. So I think each of our pitches brings in a different team, and you know we have sort of a process document that everybody at a certain level knows and understands. So they know our way of pitching, but we bring in people who have capacity / interest. So you know there's often a time somebody will hear a name of a brand going around and they're like, I absolutely love that. So we had one recently for thing called Parkdean. It's like a British holiday resort, sort of on the coast. And one of our creative teams have spent basically every summer there growing up as a kid. So they're like, I have to work on this because like I have gone there, my parents have gone there, my family's gone there. So it's kind of, yeah, we find the right sort of passion and skill set and capacity. I think linking back to the conversation we were having earlier about expectations of people coming into the industry now, they don't want to be working late every single night in the same way that we I certainly did. But also it just impacts the whole agency. If you've got somebody working late every single night because they don't actually have capacity to be on a pitch and their client work, it will impact the pitch and you're probably not going to win it, and it will impact the client, which could lead to a pitch. So it's, we're very careful with building our teams, thinking about passion, skill and capacity.
That connection thing's quite important though, Tom, isn't it? If you haven't got a member of your team that had been to a Parkdean resort, how can you manufacture that magic sauce, that connection with the client in the room? How does that work?
So we actually, we sent a big block of the team down to Parkdean's the weekend before we met them. So the one who goes regularly loved it. She was like, great, free weekend at my favorite resort. We sent sort of, I think five of the six people that are going to be in the room to different locations for the weekend, just so they could understand it and kind of go into the chemistry meeting knowing the client's product, kind of knowing who's there, knowing what the offer is like. Not fully, they haven't gone to every single one, but enough to be able to genuinely talk to the client about the product.
You were clearly invested in that particular pitch. I mean, we were talking about the real cost earlier. I mean, that's an actual cost, isn't it, in terms of doing your homework? Yeah. And Ellie talked earlier about having the product in the room. Sometimes it's always amazed me where, sometimes an agency, I mean, I've been CMO side for so long, and they've never even picked up the product or tried to log in or tried to do anything online with it. It always used to blow my mind. You're like, oh my God, why are you in the room? It's so bizarre.
Or you have the competitor product in the room. Catering have done that to me recently for a soft drink, and then they brought Diet Coke in, and literally the client was about to come in. It's like, oh no, what are you doing? always be over the finer details. But that point that you just made, Tom, about like going to the part D, or like going to the factory or do the store visit, that is so important. But back to Jason's point, it really annoys me when intermediaries will say, well, if you're going to go and see the factory, then we need to offer that to everyone. It's like, but everyone has an ask. That's what we think is important. And yeah, that really annoys me when intermediaries have to make it a level playing field, but you've come up with the idea of going on the factory visit or the site tour, or going to try and do that, go that extra mile.
I'm going to move us on to pitch hygiene. Keeping things clean, how do you qualify a good lead from a bad one? Jason, I'm going to come to you first on that one.
Well, I think, and I think we talked a little bit about this in terms of the frameworks, that the guys have sort of said in terms of fame, fortune, and people and that kind of stuff. I think generally speaking, in terms of qualifying, we try to pitch half as often, twice as hard, as it were, because we're all under squeeze margins, and we all find resources ever tighter. So the ones you go for, I think you have to double down on, but go for half as many, and you will hopefully have a better chance of winning. What I would love to talk about, and I'm just conscious of time, is a little bit is I think the importance of avoiding the pitch if you can. So do you mind if I just talk to that for a moment, Helen?
Yeah, of course.
I think the challenge we all have is that and so many of our pitches will come to us via intermediaries, or they come to us as pitches. And if those do come that way, I think inevitably, as we've talked about, your challenge is, well, how do you innovate, how do you disrupt, and wherever possible bend the rules. But there is a big swathe of business out there where the client has not decided exactly how it's going to come to how the business is going to get appointed. And I think that there's two really important things that you can do and think about that will help drive that. The first is your positioning and your proposition, and what can you do to position yourself in a way that doesn't necessarily, you can either try to be the best in your category, or you can try to be the only competitor in your category. And sure, a lot of the services we do aren't necessarily unique, but sometimes it's how you put those services together and the bundle of services you offer that you can create a unique offering from. We're a brand and cultural transformation company. I haven't heard of many others of those. Now, sure, some of what we do is services that many other agencies provide, but the bundle in which we put them together and that proposition is hopefully different. The second thing then is, can you avoid a pitch process by a consultancy-based offering? And we've, for example, this year found two pieces of business that have turned into, over the course of the past 12 months, over £1 million in fee income by a consultancy-based approach, where you're selling the client something that they have to do with you rather than a creative execution. And sure, it's easier if you try and position that a bit higher up the value chain. One of those pieces was actually for a piece of loyalty business, and another was something that would involve a series of client interviews and something they couldn't pitch out. But if you can find a way to create a piece of consultancy, even at the most basic stage, a workshop, then for those kind of long-term prospects that you're talking to that are deciding how they're going to find their new partner, what can you do to avoid that pitch process and all the cost and competition that goes with it?
No, I definitely think there's some key points there for everybody to go away and have a think about. However, if you are in a pitch and a tender process, there are almost some mandatories, aren't there, in terms of the things on your checklist? Ollie, you actually gave me a checklist. Do you want to run through some of those points that you think people should be thinking about?
So there's just a few that I would and immediately when it comes in, and I tend if actually, so I think someone's asked about procurement on there as well. It's actually these questions are quite good to ask procurement as they come through the door, because procurement don't mind you being really direct. So actually, I quite welcome that at the beginning of the process. But I would say, do you have access to the decision makers? And that's not via email. That's in person. You need to be able to have a dialogue with them, right? Is there a budget? Is it signed off? You need to tell me what it is, right? And actually, if you're a media, that talk to me about what your media budget is going to be, rather than slice and dice it into agency revenue, which they might not best do at that stage. We won't pitch against more, so 5 total on the shortlist is all we would go against. That's uncomfortable for me, to be honest. I would probably rather it's 4, but at 5, that's the absolute max if it hits all of the other criteria. A pitch ask that's commensurate with the prize at the end. So and I think, again, someone's asked one of the questions in here about presenting creative work. Very happy to present creative work if it's commensurate with the prize at the end. And it's just going, this stuff takes time. Time is our resource. If you are not at the end of the process here, if it's not a decent sized client, then we can't put loads and loads of resource into it. Every other industry on the planet would talk in those terms, right? And then I would say an internal one for me, and God, maybe this is me oversharing because of what we've been through this year, but can I put my best people on this? Because if your best people aren't in the room, you're probably unlikely to win it, and you're probably you're walking into a room without a leg. So I think just think about whether you can put your best people on it, and if it's one of those big pitches, like everyone else is going to have their best people on it, so you need to do the same.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think that may have just answered the question that we've had come in about, presenting creative, that whether it be AI generated or not, it's still time and vetting and your creative team in there, and you're almost doing the brief before doing the brief, or getting a brief even sometimes. I mean, in the majority of your cases, just for each of you, a yes or no answer, do you normally present creative? Maybe not in a media buying situation, but from a kind of creative brief perspective, do you always go in with some kind of visual?
I'd say that's changed massively. Like, I don't know how everyone else said it. Like, yes, unequivocally used to be yes. Like, that's just what we did. I think now and I think intermediaries have been massively helpful on this, right? Some of them have just got different shape processes now, and there's some really, really good ones that will just go, you know what, it's workshop, there's no work being shown. Other times we'll show them what the solution might look like and we'll map it out.
Yeah, I think we've found, I think our default instinct is show the work, show the work, show them that we can make something amazing. But actually, we normally don't, unless it's sort of like a sort of quite classic long pitch process where you have a briefing and a tissue meeting and there's a clear expectation there is going to be a creative presentation at the end. But with shorter processes, we don't. We might show a bit of thinking and sort of directions, but I think our best work is made when it's made with the clients, and we're very clear about that. We'll show you a bit of thinking. We might show you a word or a territory or an idea, but we're not going to make good work if we're doing it without you in the room, because nobody knows their product and their audience and their team and their stakeholders better than them. So, yeah, it's an instinct we have to fight, because I think everyone gets excited, but we're more successful when we don't at an early stage.
Isn't it only 20% of work shown in a pitch actually ever sees the light of day, which is scary when you think about the hours and cost of it. But to Jason's point, when you're trying to avoid a pitch, I think it's harder for clients to buy because everyone's used to the pitch process, and then it's security for clients, isn't it? So I've tried with varying degrees of success to circumnavigate the pitch process. And it's hard if they've set their mind on a pitch. It's normally earlier stages when you can do that, but clients like to know where they are in the process. So I think having a clear process of, this is how we want to work collaboratively with you. Workshops are really good for that. We do a thing called a ZAG in a day, and it's really clear of what you're going to get from that day, and you will point after that, we'll get to this stage, but what the next stages are. So clients want to know where they are on the stage, on the process, and what they're buying into. And it's really hard as a creative agency to not want to jump to the creative bells and whistles, but we'll often show creative ways in and work with the clients and see where they are on the spectrum, from really out there to kind of really safe. And one of our qualifying things, so everything that Ollie said, but it's, have they got creative ambition? So we're really strict on the work that they've made previously, but also the clients individually will look at where they've been before and the work they've made, because if the clients don't buy good work, then we don't want to, it's going to be a waste of everyone's time and we're not aligned.
Thank you for that. And we've mentioned a couple of times search consultants. I know there's mixed reviews around the world about how good they are in various places, but we've got a question coming from Christine McNabb. Do you have any tips for engaging search consultants internationally?
I think the international ones are slightly different to your domestic friends that you may well be connected to. I find with domestic ones, it's very relationship based. International, their first question is going to be, where have you done it before and how did you operationalize? In my experience, we just hear from everyone else actually on this as well, but in my experience, if you don't have a good answer to that, they'll be like, come back when you do. So that's probably the way in. I think once you're in, they are just human beings like everybody else. And you keep them up to date with what you've been up to, you build a relationship, you're useful when you need to be. I think I'm teaching everyone to suck eggs a little bit, but you know what I mean? But just be aware of what the gates are, because I think sometimes we've got to spend time on things that are productive. And if it's not productive, don't spend time on it.
Thank you, Ollie. And just a question from the team out in Propel in Manila. JC's on the call. He's asked, procurement has been quite involved in the pitch process. How have your markets protected the value of the pitch and the ideas versus the KPIs of procurement to manage the cost? Does anyone want to pick that one up? I know we briefly touched on it earlier.
Yeah, I mean, I think most of our pitches have been sort of UK based, and like you were saying, we're very strict on the people that we pitch for, and kind of like, what work have they bought before? Because I think that's a sign of, do they understand the value of building brands and telling stories and connecting emotionally, or are they approaching this like selling paper clips? It's kind of like, are they here to do sort of big, not necessarily big, but advertising that is creative and uses creativity to push their business forward. So most of the conversations we have are very positive, and often sort of lots of procurement teams either will be bought into that and understand the value of creativity with the brands that we work with, or if they don't, they know that they don't. So they kind of just look at the costs and kind of don't try and reduce it down. So we've had quite a positive positive interactions with all the procurement teams that we work with, sort of before and after the pitch. I mean, sometimes after the pitch, but that's just them trying to get costs down.
Our best pitches have been when we've developed a good relationship with the procurement from the beginning. And it's it's good for the pitch team as well, because you can do that separately. So often in a new business role, your role is to have that relationship with the procurement. You can be doing that separately to the marketing teams and the team working on the solution. So we find we will always, again, it's not, well, maybe it is creating an unfair advantage, but if we don't have time, so you have check-ins and Q&As with the clients, we will always ask for those with procurement and develop a relationship, because at the end of the day, we always say to them, what do you need to look good internally? Because they have their own KPIs, and it's a negotiation, isn't it? It's classic negotiation skills, knowing what's important to you, what's important to them, and where you can meet in the middle. And there's often added value that can be huge for you that's really easy for them to give away. So I think developing that relationship and understanding where you both need to get to, you'd be surprised it can actually be easier than it seems, and it's better for both. I think that's when we've had good pitches. But equally, when we've been asked for a rate card before we've even met them, that's a massive red flag, and we would question why they need that, and that we're not a shop and we don't just have one rate card, but how much it costs to work with us. So yeah, there's red flags to look out for, and if you can't get access to the procurement team, then I think that would be a big red flag for us, and we potentially would say no.
Yeah, I think just to completely support what the guys have said. I think the one red flag and red line for us is, and we see it more on international pitches, the notion that pitching the client would own the IP without paying for it. And sometimes you see that blurred if you're being given a pitch fee, but usually that fee is a very token sum. So any notion for us that the client owns the IP as part of simply a pitch or just a small pitch fee is an absolute red line for us.
Thank you for sharing that. Any final points from the speakers, just because we're at the top of the hour, that you just want to make as a as a final point to get across? I think you've covered most of what we started with, Tom.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I think, it's something that Jason said earlier of, pitching can be some of the most exciting and creative moments of, our careers. Like, I think back really fondly of, hilarious conversations at 4 a.m, pinning stuff up on the wall. It can be really fun. I think the biggest sign you're going to lose a pitch is if you're not enjoying it in the pitch. There's one that I can think of where we just weren't having fun, and maybe we shouldn't have gone for the process, and it didn't work. So we always try and make sure that we're enjoying ourselves. It's a time to be really creative and push the boundaries, and learn about a new sector. So yeah, if try and make it fun, try and enjoy the process, because you will get a better result afterwards.
That is definitely one thing I can say for all the independents anywhere in the world is they're really fun places to work. You have far less of the kind of red tape and bureaucracy that you have in the holding networks. And look, there's a reason why we work in this sector, right? It is meant to be fun. And there's no reason pitching should be any different to that, and having fun with the client in the room, because that emotional connection we talked about earlier is quite important. I am going to close this at that point because we are on the hour. Lots of other people will be inevitably joining other calls if they are still in their working day. If they're not, thank you so much for joining us for the Network One for this special interest group kickoff event. Huge thank you to Ellie, to Ollie, to Tom and Jason for joining us today. It's been a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences on the call. We're getting lots of thank yous in the chat as well. This will be available on demand as well. So we hope you enjoyed watching if you are watching later on. And just a huge thank you from the whole team here at the Network One and the speakers today. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.